fitness business nerds, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And today I'm really stoked because I'm having someone on the podcast who's never been on the podcast before, who's a dear friend of mine, former employee of Mark Fisher Fitness, current team member at Business for Unicorns. And I'm just so glad that we're finally having a recorded conversation that the world can hear, because this brilliant person you're going to fall in love with if you don't know her already. It's Wheels. Hello, Wheels. How are you?
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Welcome to the Business for Unicorns podcast. I can't believe we haven't done this yet already. So thank you for doing this.
Of course, long-time listener. Just been sitting here sad in this room, waiting to be asked to be on.
Just year after year, collecting. When am I going to be on that podcast? Yeah, that's exactly your vibe. So, friends, if you don't, if you don't know Wheels, I'm turning into a monster as we talk. If you don't know Wheels, let me tell you about Wheels. Wheels was a team member at Mark Fisher Fitness for how many years?
9 with a little sabbatical in there.
Yeah, a little sabbatical. We're not going to gloss over that. 9 fucking years. She was a director of training for us for many of those years. And I will say, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but, reigned over some of the most peaceful times on our training team when she was the manager of our training team. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And recently joined the team of Business for Unicorns as a coach, which I'm so stoked about. And already our Unicorn Society members who've gotten to work with Wheels have been telling us how fucking brilliant she is and how lucky they feel to have access to her brain and her experience. So that's crushing. Wheels also runs our own podcast called the Covering Ground podcast, and it's currently doing some other coaching outside of Business Unicorns these days. So I'm just so excited that we carved out some time to do this. Let's just maybe start with just maybe sharing with the people, what are you up to these days? Like what's Wheels' life like these days? What are you working on? What are you focused on? Go for it.
Yeah, so these days, I wake up when my eyeballs open. I'll just say that instead of like the alarm at 5 a.m., which has been amazing. But post MFF, I've been doing more coaching in the like creative arts space. I've been working with a lot of creators who need accountability, who need help with like productivity and procrastination and managing their energy and environment. And it's been a really cool kind of transition from fitness, because so many principles, we take from fitness and we can just apply them to other people's life. So that's what I've been up to and enjoying some leisure time.
That's amazing. And tell the people what you talk about on the Covering Ground podcast, because you all should go listen. There's some really amazing conversations.
Yeah. So I really dive into how to manage like fear, resistance, some of the internal barriers that come up when we're pursuing projects, how to kind of nip some of the procrastination in the butt, or at least recognize what it is, how to set up the environment for success, how to just manage energy. Because I think it's easy to, kind of manage time and time block, but it's like, are we doing things that need more of our brain at the beginning of the day instead of at the end of the day? So it's like managing the energy and all that. And so that's what we talk about. And then I have some cool, like very, very accomplished business owners, artists, book writers on the show, just kind of talking about their process and the things that come up for them that are big blocks that they have like overcome and kind of press through to get to where they are. So I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been listening since you first started, and one of the things I appreciate about it the most is how diverse the group of people is that you talk to, and all the ways you could mean diverse, from where they are in their careers, the kind of work they do. There's just such a great variety of people who are just badass in their field, and it's just really inspiring. So, friends, go listen to the Covering Ground podcast if you haven't already. Well, let's dive in. We're actually going to do a little bit of a different format today, and I told Wheels we're going to do this, and she agreed. So, so what we're going to do, because I know Wheels so well, is I actually am going to share what I think are top three superpowers that I know Wheels has, and try and get her in real time on this podcast to talk about why she's so fucking good at that. And so this is the first time I've ever done it, because not everyone on this podcast I know as well, but there's just certain things that I know this audience would really benefit from hearing from you, Wheels. And Wheels does not know what I'm going to share in advance. So she's going to be winging it right alongside all of you. She's going to be hearing this for the first time. And so thanks for being so brave. So the first thing that I think is one of your greatest superpowers is you are a manager of people that those people like. Yeah, and I don't say that lightly. You are a manager of people who somehow you can manage the people and they will still like you. And that is fucking rare. That is rare. I mean, from my own personal experience, I know I think I've gotten to be a pretty good manager over the years. And I can count so many people who've just not liked me as a manager. I know so many just brilliant managers who I think, do so many things right and are still just not liked as a person. And I've watched you manage people for many years, and I can't think of anyone who you've managed who just was like, nope, Wheels was the fucking worst, right? Like everyone, even though you worked side by side and sometimes held hard boundaries and did the hard work, you were a manager people like. So let's start with this. This is a big, broad question. You can take this any direction. What's your approach to managing people?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with what we've practiced year after year after year after year at Mark Fisher Fitness. And that is the ability to communicate and really the ability to listen and being able to, meet people one-on-one where they're at, just like we do with our clients, has been huge. And really asking questions and listening to where they are in their lives and not just in their business. And, respecting that is huge. And I think part of it is making sure I see them and I see what their superpowers are and I bring that out. So I think my job as a manager is to just see where their sparks are in people and just like fan that flame. Because what I've realized in myself and other people over the years is like people want to be not only seen, but they want to be appreciated and they want to feel like they're contributing and doing their best work. And I think it's easy, at least for me, I think, when I had managers in the past in any job, it's easy for the manager to kind of step up and not like a dictatorship, but it's like, this is how things are done. And this is, the way that this should go. And I don't think that. I think for me, if I'm going to manage people, I need to see what they're best at and help them do that and bring out the best in them. And also make sure that the team sees what those strengths are. And everybody's going to be different. And it's not my job to be the best at everything. And in fact, if I am the best at everything, I'm doing a shitty job at developing people and managing people. And so I think there's a like and respect because I really do, one, care about the person. I do listen to, what they have to say. We have open levels of communication and the ability to communicate differently with everybody because everyone's communication style is different, but then just helping them be the best person they can be in that role and helping them shine, I think is a huge part of being liked.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. There's so many things I want to pull out of there, right? One is that, your ability to meet each person where they're at, right? Be flexible as a manager. So often people are like, well, my management style is this. You don't get to have a management style as a manager. You have to have management styles, right? You have to be different people for different people. And that's part of what makes you so effective. So I love that you said that. I love that it's about centering them and their skills and their superpowers and fanning the flames of their sparks and, and making space for them to thrive. And so maybe let's drill down on, let's, double click, as they say, on that. And just talk to me a little bit, how do you do that? So if you're working with a new employee, how do you discover what their superpowers are? And then how do you make space for amplifying it, right? I mean, I'll talk about challenges in a second, but just give me some tactical ideas of what does that look like for you when you're developing a relationship with someone you're managing?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, a lot of times it's just kind of hearing or watching them be stoked about something. So for example, before I left, we brought in kind of a slew of new coaches and it was listening to them talk about what gets them stoked and kind of putting them in those positions and right away kind of letting them step into those roles of I am a coach and I am sassy and I am going to have fun and all right, we're going to go there with you.
Yep.
So it's observation, but really listening to what they talk about. And I think, for employees who maybe aren't necessarily new or they're new or haven't spent as much time with them as some of the OG crews, it's truly just an observation and then hearing feedback about what like the ninjas are into and where they're really shining. The feedback always helps in fanning the flames. But again, it's just like it's listening, it's observing, it's really being present with people to kind of see where they're at and what they're stoked about. And a lot of times I'll ask, like
Mm-hmm.
I did a survey um, as part of it. It's like, what are you passionate about? What are you like boned up about? What do you want to do at Mark Fisher Fitness that you will feel excited about doing? And sometimes just asking is a great way to go.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I love that you just said you have to just watch people, see what they get excited about, see where their passion is, see what really bones them up. And if it's not obvious, ask them. And for context, for dear listeners, we also mentioned ninjas. Ninjas at MFF are our clients. For those of you who don't know the lingo, but yeah, I think it's another piece of it is talk to clients. What do they see in this person that makes them stand out or unique? So I think that's really smart. Let me ask about the flip side of this coin. Is that in some cases, people come, and we've had this experience many times at MFF, and they have a very specific passion or purpose or things they want to focus on, and we just don't have a lane for them. Like there's just not a place for them to spread those particular wings in this particular
Yeah.
space. And so I know you've been part of some of those conversations. How do you manage that?
We have had a lot of people that have wanted
We
to.
get a lot of we get a lot of creative types at MFF who have a lot of interests and
Yeah,
things, and at MFF, we've tried to continue to do what we're best at MFF. Which is like kettlebell
yeah,
classes and small group training.
yep,
That's all we do.
right.
And there's a lot of people who have other interests and passions, and it's hard not to squash those sparks, right? It's not hard not to extinguish those sparks
Mhm.
and hold the boundaries of the business. And so I'm just curious, what's your perspective on navigating that?
Yeah. So, even as of this year, I had a conversation with somebody
Mm-hmm.
about, what Mark Fisher Fitness is
Mm-hmm.
and what it isn't. And we do a lot of that in our like on the biz team and like figuring out what that is. But for the super passionate people who want to go beyond, what Mark Fisher Fitness is, I think one challenging conversation that I had was like, Mark Fisher Fitness is a group fitness studio where
Mm-hmm.
we do science, evidence based fitness in a fun way, just taking them back to like ridiculous human serious fitness.
Yep.
And anything outside of that is awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
you should feel passionate about that and pursue that in a way that like fills you up. But ultimately, is what you want to do expanding the business or fueling it in a way that is useful for the business and maybe not like on your own agenda, which is
Mm.
sometimes like hard
That's
to
hard.
hear because there are things that I'm super boned up about that do not fall into the Mark Fisher Fitness lane. But at the end of the day, it's like we're a business and this is our mission and these are the people that we serve, and you got to be on this boat
Mm-hmm.
when you're at Mark Fisher Fitness, and
Yeah.
we'll support you in any way that we can in continuing education and helping you connect with people that are in maybe these other spaces. But in the doors, like we all got to be on the same team, rowing our boat in the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great way of talking about it. And it's one of those things that's a challenge for any business that's doing well is that you attract great people with great talents and amazing interests and passions in areas that maybe fall outside the lane of the business, and holding that boundary is hard. We haven't always been good at it at MFF, but I know that, you're, when you were there managing, I know that, at least the people who we were saying, no, you can't do that to felt seen and heard. Right. I think that goes back to what you were saying before is that even if, as a manager, you have to draw a line in the sand, you can at least do it in a way that's full of compassion and empathy and have the person still be stoked to go pursue their passions, just maybe not here.
Well, totally. And I think, I mean, you bake, you're a baker,
Yep.
right? It's like if we're baking a cake, it's awesome to like have all these ingredients, but like if someone wants to bring, cayenne pepper and
Yeah.
like some Italian seasoning, those are great in other dishes, but like they just don't belong in the cake. So
Yeah.
it's
They
like
don't.
it's kind of an easy like analogy to think of, but just
Yeah.
putting in perspective that people that is digestible for people to like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the mistake I see too many, especially early managers and leaders make is just say yes to everything. and then they get this mission creep where they're adding all these services, all these products, all these one-off exceptions. We're going to do this for this client, and I'm interested in this kind of coaching, so I'm going to do this in my one-on-ones. Then you get this, mixed bag. We'll use your cooking analogy. You get this stew that just has too many ingredients in it that you can't taste any one, and it's just tastes like mud, And so, we can keep talking about this. I'm going to discipline myself and move on to the next superpower, because this could be a 9-hour podcast if I don't. So the second thing that I think you're fucking brilliant at, Wheels, and this could be a long list, but we're doing top 3, is similar but different, which is connecting with clients who feel like you're their best friend. And I'll say this, I'll acknowledge up front that this is a blessing and a curse, right? And for many of our, helping professionals who listen and our coaches on the floor, that developing great, connected, authentic relationships with our clients is like what we do every day. And it's helpful to have a kind of a professional boundary that says, like, we're not actually maybe best friends, or you don't own me. I say that with a little bit of jest. And so I'm just curious. Let's focus on the positive side of this coin first, which is, what have you done over the years that has made clients just adore you so much?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Maybe like a 2-part. One, I think just like practicing what we preach, where it's like, it's fun. Maybe we're serious, but it's like, we're going to have a great time. There's going to be a comfort level. There's going to be like a trust, like it's a conversation that's going back and forth. It's not just me, standing at the front of the room, yelling, telling people what to do.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that I really learned from one of our former employees, Brian Patrick Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Shout out BPM.
Shout out BPM. I remember when I first came to MFF, just kind of like watching him in a space and really seeing every person in the room feel like they're the only person in the room.
Yeah.
And he had a charisma about him. And I think I've read The Charisma Myth.
Yep.
You read that book?
Yep.
There's a part in it where they're saying, you can make somebody feel like you're the smartest person in the room, or you can make them feel like the smartest or the most seen person in the room. And I think that's the difference between like really wonderful coaches and building trust and being connected with clients, is like making them feel like they're the best person in the room, not vice versa. So I think those were 2 ways
I think that's so smart. And honestly, it's so counter to the kind of celebrity trainer thing we have going on these days with the Pelotons and all the companies, right? They really are trying to elevate trainers to be centered in every room they're in.
Yeah.
And I think that flipping that on its head and saying, well, really as coaches, our job is to make each person in the room feel centered, feel the most important, feel the smartest, feel the funnest, feel the most charismatic. That's a different skill set. And maybe, again, let's just maybe double click on this one. What does that look like? So whether people do small group training or large group training, when you're in the room, what are some of the actual observable behaviors we want coaches to do that really enables that focus on clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think one we're huge at is like acknowledging them by name, which is like such an easy.
Use their fucking name. Like, let's start there. Yeah.
But like having an individual, especially in a larger class, which might be a little bit more difficult, but like having an individual moment where I'm like physically with somebody, maybe with an appropriate touch or a cue, but, telling them, not only like giving them corrections, but like acknowledging like what they're fucking crushing, like in their face. You are doing the best deadlift I've ever seen in my life. And it could even be things like new shoes. How fast can you run in those new shoes? You know what I mean? It's like silly things, but there's a constant moving through the space where you're not just focused on one person, but I'm really trying to give each person in any, training capacity, large or small group, like equal attention as much as possible, but really like truly like looking in their eyes and seeing them and like, you are crushing this, like this specific thing. I see you, I'm with you. And I think it's easy. I know when I was a new coach and was kind of scared to give corrections at all.
Sure.
But like to be with somebody and very specifically just like look them in the face and tell them what they're doing well. It's like, it takes time and practice, but man, it's like the connection and the trust that you build with people is just like it's a game changer.
Yeah, well said, my friend. I want to just kind of highlight and underline that specific part, because it's one thing to shout across the room, "Good job, Wheels! Keep it up, Karen! Well done, Bob!" Right? Like that's one way of doing it, but that's not what you're saying here, right? It's going to look the person in the eyes, have a specific moment with them, and give them some specific piece of feedback or praise or cueing that tells you, like, I'm paying attention specifically to you because I just saw your new shoes. I just saw you turn that knee out by an extra 5 degrees. Like I just saw you grab a heavier kettlebell, right? It's like I am actually seeing and paying attention to you and saying that out loud. Not enough coaches do it. And it's surprisingly hard.
Well, even the silliest thing, like people's haircuts.
Mm.
I mean, I know it's crazy, but like someone's haircut and you're, whoa, yo, fresh cut, bro. Like this is good. And people are like, yeah, I did get my haircut. Like you noticed me.
Yep.
You noticed me, I think is a big thing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the darker side of this coin, which is that in some cases, having clients, so obsessed with an individual trainer is challenging. It's challenging because if they leave, right, sometimes the clients leave with them. We don't have that as much at MFF because we really do kind of train everyone as a team. But in many gyms who are listening, those relationships mean that when the trainer leaves, the client leaves. And also sometimes as trainers, we've heard this many times at MFF, it takes so much of your life force to be available for clients. And when they want to connect with you outside of the coaching hour, socially, when they want to connect with you, just when they see you walking down the street or they see you walking around the building when you're not coaching, it requires a lot of energy. So a lot of things we talk about at MFF is boundary setting. So, maybe what are some quick tips you have for ways you've successfully set boundaries with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I will just, fully confess, like it's brutal for me to do.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I think especially if you're somebody like who has empathy and really like has each person's best interest at heart. I'm like, I want to know what's happening in your life.
Yep.
So it's been super, super hard. But I think, one thing, and maybe this is different at MFF than other places, but I have in the past given ninjas like my personal phone number. And I've learned that is not a good choice.
Retreat.
Yeah. And so, so I have had to, even in the times that I'm like, you text me or whatever, like we can hang out when it's crossed the line of like, oh, can you take me out of this class?
Yeah.
I've really had to be like, you know what, like this, I want to connect you in this way, but like, I can't do MFF stuff over text. And, I've had a few people too that like specifically in the pandemic, when somebody needed something, they would go to my Instagram and send me a DM that was like a challenge or something with MFF. And I just had to be like, we can't do this here. And because this is my get out of my head, get out of my work time. I want to scroll mindlessly and not be like brought back into work mode. So I'm happy to talk about this with you, but we have to do it over email. And so just being, unfortunately, it's like the boundary had been crossed. And I had to kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe this is like too much for me.
Yeah. I'll just say this, Wheels, that not to interrupt, but that's sometimes how we discover our boundaries, right? They kind of have to be crossed sometimes. We're like, oh, I don't want that. But I couldn't have possibly had the forethought to imagine that I would have needed a boundary there until someone steps over it. So like, I think that's very common.
Yeah, for sure. And what else? What I did another thing about boundaries. Yeah, it's a toughie. But also having like, if we can get the collective group to do it. So like the whole training scene. So like during the pandemic, for example, like we had to kind of get everybody on board of like, we will not do these things collectively because if one coach does it, there's an expectation that other coaches will do it as well. So we kind of had to, group up and be like, okay, what are some boundaries being crossed? What are some maybe inappropriate things that are happening? And we all have to collectively just agree that we will not let anybody cross those boundaries because it affects all of us.
Yeah. Well said. I think that's great. I think that, the first step for listeners based on what you've said here is really just start to get clear and build awareness in yourself about what your boundaries are. Some cases you need to wait for them to be crossed, but then to clearly communicate what they are. And it seems like a lot of them for trainers, because you're not alone. I've heard a lot of this. It's really just about when you have access to me. right? Can you text me? Can you reach out to me on DM? How fast am I going to respond to you? And, how much time am I giving you when I see you face to face? Do I need 5 minutes after I'm done teaching a class to go decompress, or can I talk to 10 people? Right. Right. And so it's like what kind of access they have is often where boundaries need to be made. And I love that you mentioned that, you can strengthen boundaries by working collectively as a team to kind of draw a clear line where everyone's going to put their foot down, which I think is really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think with a full team, just to throw this out, uh, especially as the manager for the rest of the team that maybe boundaries are being crossed, it's, I think, easier for them to just like blame me.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like just say Wheel says we can't do this.
yeah.
So then they don't have to feel, any kind of guilt or any kind of way. It's just like Wheel said this.
Great.
And so like
Yeah, no, that's really useful as a manager. Like, you know what? I'll take the heat for that. Like blame it on me. I think it can be a useful strategy. Yeah, good for you. All right, I know we're getting close on time here. We got maybe 5 more minutes left before I have to wrap it up. And I want to get to superpower number 3. And again, this could be a longer list, but we're going to stop at 3. One of the things, the third thing that I think you're amazing at, Wheels, is having a growth mindset. Meaning, ever since I've known you, I've seen you adopt, one of the things I think is the most important quality in humans, which is just an intense and sometimes relentless curiosity to keep learning shit. And not just to learn shit, I mean by like reading books or taking certs, which you do plenty of, but really getting curious about each moment of your life, right? Each live experience. I see you doing this on social media. I saw you do this by raising questions in meetings. I see you just do this in our personal interactions, right? That I see you constantly, and on their podcast is another great example of how you do this, is get curious about everything you see and hear and use it to try and learn something about yourself, learn something about others, learn something about the world. So I'll start with, again, an obnoxiously broad question, but where does that curiosity come from?
Wow, that's a big.
I know we should have had some
That's a big
gummies,
one. That's a
some
big one.
edibles before we had this conversation. But
Totally.
yeah,
Where does it come from? Hmm. This is probably a weird answer,
hmm
but growing up in a cornfield in Michigan without the internet, without for whatever reason, I feel like even way back then, it was like, I know there's something more out there.
mm,
I know there's more. It can't just be this. And so I think from a very young age, it was just like, okay, um, so I think it started from a very, very young age. And I think part of it too is, kind of trying to figure out who I want to become in the world or who I am at any given moment.
yeah,
And I think that deep desire to just keep going and kind of reinventing, or I think the more curious I am too, the more it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. It's
yeah,
exciting,
exactly.
right? It's like,
Yeah,
and like you, I also have a deep passion for psychology and just how the brain works and how we are held back in certain ways. And so I'm fascinated by all of it, but I probably, like, from childhood, it's just like, there's got to be more. There's got
yeah,
to be more out here.
yeah. That's not a weird answer at all. I think that's really honest. So then, just talking through, like, now in where you are in your professional career, how do you decide what to spend time learning and what's just like a passing curiosity? How do you decide where to double down
Mm,
and really, really learn something?
mhm.
And when do you decide, like, yeah, that article was enough? Because I find so many people that I'm talking to, members of our Unicorn Society, other people who are, at this stage in their careers, have a hard time navigating. We've learned all the basics for the things we do in our life. We've learned all the basics that make us good at our professional lane. But
Mhm.
then if we want to keep learning and keep investing in our curiosity, there's
Yeah.
a lot of hard choices that have to get made about where our time and attention goes. So I guess what I'm really asking is, how do you decide where your time and attention goes for the things you learn about these days?
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, it's always easy to do any kind of like confirmation bias and to have a lane, right? It's like it's
hmm
good to like be like know what you know and you want to get better at. But for me right now, a lot of my learning and growth has come from some of the clients that I've been working with and
Mm,
some of the things that they struggle with that I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not as equipped in this area. And
yeah.
maybe some things that I felt were like woo woo in the past. It's like, okay, somebody is like really struggling with, self care. and we're like
Mm-hmm.
self-care, whatever. But start reading books. I started reading a book. Gosh, it's called what? The Self-Care something recently to kind of work with this client,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of judging going into it. But
Yeah.
like right from the beginning, this woman had a quote that was like, "What if you had a healthy career and a successful personal life instead of
Mm-hmm.
a successful career?" To start. And it was just like, oh, okay. It's like some of that stuff is very client driven. So I think that is, the curiosity comes from like, oh, I have not even thought about being interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's a great lane because then what happens is that your learning gets to be applied right away, right?
Yep.
And we all know that's what makes learning the stickiest,
Yeah.
right? Is that when you can use the thing you just learned. So I think that's a great kind of tip for our listeners is that if you can learn in a way that helps you better serve the people that you're serving, and in some cases better serve yourself, and you can learn the thing and then apply it right away, right? That's going to make your learning faster. It's going to make the things easier to remember when you apply them. So I know we're coming at time, and I said we're going to end maybe 5 minutes ago, but let's just ask one more question in this department. For our listeners out there who are still in the process of growing their business, now that you've been working with Unicorn Society members for a little while, what are some of the most important kind of people skills that you think that gym owners, especially people who are managing and leading other people,
Mm.
what are the most important people skills that you think they should really focus on developing first?
I mean, for sure, communication. And by communication, I mean listening.
Mm-hmm.
Like listening skills without thinking about the answer that you're going to say, or creating respect, like truly just like listening and trying to hear. And I know that takes a little bit of time, like 3 levels of listening, which I
Mm-hmm.
know Business for Unicorns has a course on, or in communication. But truly like listening is one. Just kind of realizing that it's not about you
Mm-hmm.
is a big one, where it's like it's not about me. Like people are living their lives, and they have their own things that are happening in their personal lives that are hard, or maybe they got broken up with, or maybe their dog is sick. It's like recognizing that people have lives outside of the role that they play in your work, and recognizing that. Um, and I think too, it's just like finding people's spark and just fanning it and kind of letting them show up in that powerful way.
Yeah, beautiful example. Yeah, fanning their spark, recognizing that it's not about you. They have a context that's outside of your work together, right? And learning how to listen well. I think that's a great list, Wheels. Let's leave it there, my friend. Thank you for this interview. Thanks
Of
for this
course.
time. We could keep going for another 9 hours with all your superpowers, but thanks for doing it this way, just responding to my random prompts and praise. Before I let you wrap it up, I'm going to just do a few pieces of housekeeping with our listeners, which is, dear listeners, if you like this podcast, please leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Please tell us you like it. And if you want us to talk to other people, email me, michael@bestfriends.com. Let me know what you want me to talk about, who you want me to talk to. As we wrap it up, Wheels, where can people learn more about you and your work and your podcast? Where can they find you?
Yeah, Instagram is _all-wheel-drive_ covering ground podcast, AmandaWheeler.com. Business for Unicorns coaching team.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. We got all kinds of alerts. Yeah, Business for Unicorns coaching team. If you want to join Unicorn Society, I think by the time this podcast came out, I think enrollment's still open, but go to our website and find out, businessforunicorns.com. Wheels is part of the coaching teams. When you join Unicorn Society, you get up to 90 minutes per month with all of us coaches, including Wheels, who can help you do all the things we talked about on today's podcast. So thanks again, Wheels. This was a real blast, and I'll talk to you again soon. Listeners, have a kick-ass day.